I uncovered the terrifying truth behind unsolved mysteries that will haunt you forever. I never should have opened that door. The handle felt cold, clammy against my palm. The moment I pushed it ajar, a chill sliced through the air, wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. My heart raced. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into shapes that made my skin crawl. I was only looking for a place to escape, to momentarily forget the ordinary and mundane. But I had stumbled upon something darker, that I was just an average person. Waking up every day, coffee brewing, the hum of my life filling the space. The sun peeked through the curtains, warming my face. On that day, though everything warped, a sudden shiver rippled through me as the sun vanished behind thick, ominous clouds. I felt it then, a prickle at the back of my neck. My home became a mausoleum, suffocating and heavy. I stepped further into the room, heart in my throat, squinting into the suffocating darkness. The air was thick, stale, almost rancid, as if something had died in here long ago. What was that? A whisper? A soft, sorrowful sound echoed, elusive and haunting. The creeping unease crawled under my skin. I could almost hear the heartbeat of the place, a steady thumping that resonated in my bones. Was it just my imagination? I glanced around. The shadows lurked, edges blurring into the corners, watching. My pulse quickened. I heard it in a faint rustle, like fabric sliding across wood. A chill shot down my spine. I wouldn't be alone here, I realized. It was only a matter of time. Then, the door behind me slammed shut. The sound ricocheted, sharp and horrible. I swung around, panic clawing at my chest. Silence followed, thick and tangible. In that moment, I was trapped, ensnared in a web of dread. My breath hitched. I scanned the dim light for anything. The room felt alive with eyes, waiting, lurking just beyond my line of sight. And then it struck me, the figure. A shape stood obscured in the far corner, cloaked in shadow. My heart plummeted. I could barely move. Was it watching me? Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure shifted, an imperceptible movement that sent a wave of unease crashing over me. I forced my gaze to remain locked on the shadow. Somewhere deep in its depths lay a pair of eyes, pinpricks of light that consumed the very air around them. I wanted to scream, but the sound lodged itself in my throat, paralyzing me in place. In that suffocating silence, the room pulsed with a life of its own. The shadows elongated and twisted, an ebb and flow that made the very walls seem to breathe. My pulse echoed in my ears, a frantic drumbeat drowning out everything else. And then, as if sensing the panic radiating from my frozen form, the figure took a step forward, dragging an air of sorrow with it. A veil of mournful despair wrapped around its shadowy presence. Help! It was a weak whisper, more a breath than a word. The sound curled around me, insistent, filling my senses with a clammy dread. My body trembled as I fought the urge to flee, yet curiosity anchored me down. The word beckoned like a siren song from an abyss. Who are you? I croaked out, voice cracking under the weight of terror. Light flickered in the corner of my vision, a signal of something shifting in the walls of this cursed room. A palpable pulse throbbed through the air, thickening into a swirling mist that coiled around my ankles. The figure lifted a trembling arm, revealing a gaunt hand that seemed to melt into the shadows. You must listen. It will not stop. Another step, revealing more even as it obscured itself in darkness. The air thickened between us, an electric charge that made the hairs on my arms stand stiff. Suddenly, the walls shuddered as if echoing the figure's words. Despair tasted metallic on my tongue. A cold draft rushed through the room, causing me to instinctively wrap my arms around myself. But even the touch of my own skin felt foreign and unsettling. The The shadows buzzed, whispering urgent, incoherent messages that clawed at my sanity. What won't stop? I gasped, desperation spilling into my voice. All I wanted was to tear myself from this nightmare, but a part of me yearned for understanding, for a resolution. The figure took another step, and I could almost make out a tortured face beneath the veil pale, gaunt like the remnants of a lost soul begging for liberation. With each step it took towards me, the shadows twisted in protest, screaming in a cacophony of despair and suffering, filling the room with anguish. My heart raced, pounding like thunder in my chest. Behind me, the door remained steadfast, an impenetrable barrier. The walls hungrily closed in, whispering secrets that sought to drown the light of reason. Find it, the figure rasped, voice trembling as it seemed to disintegrate into the mist. Before it finds you, it fell silent, and I felt a chill engulf me, devouring the air faster than I could comprehend. The room sank deeper into darkness. Wisps of smoke slinked through the cracks in the floorboards like restless souls. As I stepped backward, my heel caught on a rotting floorboard, and I stumbled. Instinct drove me to turn toward the exit. That's when I saw it barely illuminated by the meager light that seeped through the cracks in the walls, dark and dripping with something that felt wrong in the pit of my stomach. A doorway, ajar just beyond the figure, revealed an expanse of blank, impenetrable night, a void that swallowed hope and whispered promises of eternal horror. And then, horror struck as I turned back to find the empty corner, but the figure was gone. Only a lingering whisper floated in the air, laced with the scent of decay. You are not safe, it's coming for you. The door behind me rattled violently, slamming against the frame in a desperate rhythm. Terror rooted me as I felt something cold and clammy grip my ankle, dragging me downwards. I struggled, my breath coming in ragged gasps, as shadows shrieked and writhed around me. With a desperate reach, I clawed at the floor, but it was too late. In an instant, the shadows enveloped me, bringing a suffocating darkness that erased all sense of direction, all sense of self. The last thing I felt was the wrenching sensation of falling into an abyss, a horrific scream clawing its way up my throat, silenced as I vanished from the room. And just as it seemed all was lost to that stifling darkness, a face emerged, one I recognized among those shadows. It was me, or rather, an ethereal version of myself, caught in a loop of anguish and despair, eyes wide and pleading. Find it before it finds you. Before I could cry out, the darkness split open, revealing an endless expanse of malevolent eyes glaring at me. It was no longer my shadow. It was hunting. And then silence enveloped me once more, the dread creeping in. I had descended into the unknown, and the hunt had begun. The darkness unfurled, thick as molasses, swallowing every sound and thought as I spiraled further into the obscurity of that accursed void. I tried to scream, to claw my way back to the surface of consciousness, but the chokehold of despair wrapped tighter around my throat, stifling any shred of hope. In that quantum dark, time felt eternally suspended. I was weightless, disjointed from my own body as the predatory silence shifted around me. It was as if I had transitioned into a nightmarish realm where shadows reigned supreme and sanity was but a passing wisp. An unholy hunger nibbled at the edges of my awareness. Then, from the abyss, voices echoed, warped and dissonant, stitching together fragments of horror that felt familiar yet distant. You're too late, a cold voice croaked, slithering through my mind like a serpent, sending violent shivers racing down my spine. Forget her, another chimed in, softer yet laced with malice. She is nothing but a memory lost forever. Find it, echoed a third voice, each repetition slicing through the encroaching darkness with desperate urgency. My heart hammered harder against my ribcage, an instinctual warning bell ringing, as the emotional resonance of their anguish beat like a drum in my ears. The chamber of my mind echoed with creaking sounds like the groans of a house settling into its grave, the weight of resentment and grief transforming walls into living, breathing entities. I felt them, lurking on the edges of my perception, hopes buried beneath sorrow and the unholy convergence of fear and despair. Without warning, the heavy weight of the darkness shifted. My vision ignited, flaring with scorching light, yet it was unnatural, pulsating like a living thing. I gasped. The light poured forth in waves, illuminating grotesque shapes emerging from the void. They materialized slowly, faces contorted in agony, mouths wide open in silent screams that reverberated through the fabric of time. "Join us!" roared a crowd of shadows, their once human forms ravaged by anguish and despair, stretching hands toward me, their expressions twisted with longing and sorrow. I recoiled, but the grip of fear remained unyielding. They had crossed the boundary between existence and oblivion, and I blinked hard, struggling to comprehend my new surroundings, a graveyard of forgotten souls erupting from the shadows, their faces flickering in and out of focus like broken images on an old screen. Rotted gravestones rose at impossible angles, draped in a shroud of moldering earth. Above them, a night sky heavy with swirling clouds heaved against a backdrop of stars that pulsed like the glowing eyes of unseen watchers. "What do you want from me?" I stammered, my voice barely breaking the unsettling whispers that ricocheted in the air. Remember. A voice shouted out, raw and echoing with pent-up agony. "You must remember what was taken, what was lost," and suddenly, an image surged forth within me. Haunting yet familiar, a house, old and abandoned, filled with memories that should have lain to rest. Possessed by a force I couldn't comprehend, I was ripped from the shadows and thrust into a hazy recollection. Images flickered like a film stripped of its celluloid, revealing moments tainted by laughter and innocence tainted by malevolence. My heart raced as the pieces fell hauntingly into place. The house, not unlike the one I had found myself in now, stood on the edges of my family lore, a relic of a dark past. A womb of horrors tucked away as whispered tales. In the distance, muffled but unmistakable, came a child's laughter, light and ephemeral, contrasting sharply against the cacophony of the anguished souls. That sound tugged at me through the veil of despair, urging me forward until, instinctively, I started to walk toward it, each step drawing me deeper into the graveyard of shadows. The laughter morphed into a dirge, the sweet notes swirling into a bone-chilling symphony. Suddenly, a wave of cold washed over me, and I felt a presence materializing to my side. A figure coalesced from the remnants of anguish that surrounded us, veiled in shadows that flickered with the memories of those long forgotten. "Stay away," I recoiled, feeling the icy grip of panic seize my heart. But the figure was unbothered by my trepidation. It leaned forward, its face obscured, yet its intent was chillingly clear. "You must remember the truth before it consumes you. The house, it holds the key." And then the ground beneath me trembled, fissures appearing like gaping wounds, pulling upon the shadows, threatening to unravel something hidden and ancient. The trapped souls wept louder, their cries a raging storm echoing through my thoughts. "Find it!" they screamed once more, but the laughter of the child rose above the tumult, beckoning me toward something unspeakable. With horror gripping my heart, I stumbled backward, watching as the very fabric of reality twisted around me, suffocating the light and shrouding it in obscurity. I turned, prepared to flee, but as the oppressive weight bore down upon me, the earth cracked open beneath my feet. One final scream tore from my lips, echoing into an abyss, as I felt myself plummet into a chasm of darkness, me last thought consumed by the echoes of the forgotten. And then, silence enveloped me once more. In the unnerving stillness of the void, a heartbeat pulsed me on, or something far more sinister. The silence was electric, crackling with an unseen energy that seemed to draw me further into its embrace. I felt weightless, as though suspended in a realm where time was irrelevant, yet every moment stretched painfully taut. The chilling truth of that previous scream reverberated through my consciousness, igniting an instinctual dread that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. But soon, something sharper emerged from the suffocating darkness, a sound that weaved through the heavy air, a rhythmic thudding that rose like a sinister heartbeat from below. Before I could sift through the fragments of the preceding chaos, the ground beneath me solidified into a warped, pulsating surface, alive, heaving. Shadows began to pull together, spiraling into grotesque forms, silhouettes barely tethered to humanity. I was compelled to remain still, yet I felt my very essence being drawn downward, a force far beyond my comprehension seeking to merge with my corporeal being. Suddenly, a burst of light hurtled into existence, casting stark contrasts against the darkness. It revealed haunting figures donning old, tattered clothing, their faces marked by hollow eyes shining with unshed tears. Their mouths twisted into anguished expressions, forming a wordless choir that echoed the very fabric of my despair, a symphony of suffering that resonated deep within. Help us, they seemed to whisper, though the chorus was riddled with insistence, as if they were demanding rather than pleading. I swallowed hard, trying to deny their gaze that bore into my soul. Help us break the cycle. As dread surged through me, I forced myself to peer deeper into the sea of despair that surrounded them, trying to unearth the reason behind their torment. I was struck by the realization these apparitions held remnants of lives stolen, shadows of children, parents, the forgotten. A tapestry woven from pain threaded through generations. Awaken, one apparition finally spoke, a voice trembling but commanding, echoing with an icy undertone that made my skin crawl. The house is waking, it hungers. With the mention of the house, icy fingers of memory gripped my heart anew. The child's laughter that had drawn me here flared into my mind, a bittersweet sound that both thrilled and terrified me. In that moment of distraction, I felt the ground convulse, a low rumble reverberating beneath. The figures beside me wailed harmoniously, merging their pain into a single imploring cry, tightening my chest until I could scarcely breathe. Go to the house. They screamed, their voices colliding with the growing tremors beneath me, drowning my thoughts in despair. It is the only way. You must discover the hidden truth. Their urgency sent shockwaves through me. My view began to distort, the world swirling into kaleidoscopic chaos. I was hurled into a tide of darkness. Gravity flipped, twisting my perception. When the spinning ceased, I found myself standing at the threshold of the dreaded structure, the very house that haunted the edges of my childhood memories. It loomed tall, its weathered surface contorted with gnarled tree roots and overgrown weeds, as if it were alive, greedily devouring the earth around it. Windows were gaping holes like eyes watching my every move. The door hung ajar, creaking softly as though inviting me into its embrace. But the air thickened, shimmering with dread. The very notion of crossing that threshold was chilling. I hesitated, trapped between the desperate echoes of the lost and the gnawing recognition that something lay waiting for me beyond the warped entrance. I could feel the malevolence pooling from within. As if sensing my wavering resolve, the child's laughter erupted again, this time piercing through the oppressive atmosphere, ringing with innocence and yet a sinister undertone. Come play. It beckoned, drawing me closer against my better judgment. Summoning a deep breath, I stepped forward and crossed the threshold. Instantly, the air shifted, the darkness thickened into an oppressive blanket that wrapped around me, squeezing till my breath faltered. The door slammed shut behind me, the resonating thud echoing my heartbeat, reverberating with the dread that clawed at my insides. The interior was a desolate echo of warmth, long-lost walls adorned with faded photographs, their faces obscured by time. The scent of decay wafted through the air, mingling with something sweeter yet rancid, mold and rot intertwining in an unholy symphony. Shadows danced as I moved through the lifeless halls. As I traversed from room to room, I became aware of the distinct sound of whispering, a cacophony weaving through the space, rising and falling like waves crashing against a shoreline. Find the truth, it urged, a relentless chant laced with despair that entwined around my mind, constricting tighter with each passing whisper. In a frenzy, I stumbled into what once appeared to be a child's room. The walls were adorned with peeling wallpaper that seemed to ripple like sea waves, glimmering with shadows that writhed. At the center, a small chest sat, weathered and cracked, beckoning me with an unsettling familiarity. As I reached for it, shadows spiraled around my fingers, a cold grip that sent shocks of ice through my veins. But I had to know. I needed to uncover whatever hideous truth was inside. Heart racing, I lifted the lid. Before I could peer inside, the air cracked with a sudden jolt, and the whispers erupted into wails, rising to a fever pitch that made my ears ache. No, not yet, they screamed, their voices clawing at me in a panicked frenzy. I hesitated, the weight of the moment heavy upon me, as a shadow flickered just behind me, a figure gradually materializing from the depths of darkness. I felt it before I saw it, a chill that wrapped around my heart like barbed wire. Stop, it hissed, the voice low and laden with unearthly malice. Before I could react, a chill swept through the room, and then everything went dark. I stood frozen, ensnared in suspense, the shadows closing in around me like a velvet curtain. The last thing I saw was the child's laughter erupting once more, echoing with a haunting clarity, reverberating within the void of silence as I felt the pull of the darkness ready to swallow me whole. The silence returned, suffocating and absolute. I stood immobile, caught in a heartbeat of uncertainty, the echoes of childlike laughter mingling cruelly with the suffocating chill. My pulse thundered in my ears, a frantic rhythm that matched the monstrous thumping emanating from the house's very walls. Then, as if summoned by my fears, the darkness shifted, trembling like a living thing. The shadows around me twisted and morphed into shapes, grotesque and distorted, emerging from the corners of my peripheral vision like wraiths breaking free from the shackles of forgotten nightmares. I blinked, but they were still there flickering, watching, hungry. Across the room, the small chest remained, an anchor in a sea of growing madness. It pulsed softly beneath my touch, thrumming with an energy that seemed to resonate within my bones. But before I could gather the will to look again, the dim whispers flooded back, growing more coherent, each word a knife slicing through the silence. "Release us, show them, reveal the truth," they murmured, their spectral voices thin and frail, yet laced with desperation. I felt the floor tremor beneath my feet, as if the house itself understood its imminent exposure, its secrets yearning to be unearthed, clawing from oblivion. With resolve hardened by terror, I yanked the chest open, half expecting to be met by greater horrors. Inside, there lay a jumble of items: a dusty music box, a frayed teddy bear, and stained photographs bathed in sepia tones, depicting smiling children whose faces distorted into complete horror when I turned them towards the dim light. Suddenly, the air thickened, pulling tight around my throat as if an invisible hand were choking my resolve. The laughter rose again, this time shrill and unnaturally joyous. "Now you know," it sang, the pitch of the voice sharp and brittle, slicing through the suffocating atmosphere. As I struggled to catch my breath, a bitter laugh echoed amidst the chaos. I turned abruptly to find the figure, now fully formed, looming behind me like an executioner awaiting its judgment. It was the wraith of a child, its eyes pools of obsidian, void of all innocence or humanity, yet painted with the shadows of unbearable sorrow. Its smile cracked unnaturally, revealing teeth too sharp and too many. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed, the words pouring from a mouth that opened wider, stretching into an inhuman grin in a reflexive motion. I shut the chest and staggered back, my heart racing. But as I did, a blinding flash ignited the corners of the room. The walls trembled with an urgency that vibrated through the floorboards, and the photos flared to life, bursting forth like flames. Each face that once bore joy was distorted into choking expressions of fear and despair, grasping at me from within their frames. Then the house began to shift, the very architecture bending in on itself, walls sliding as though drawn into a void. It was as if the foundation of reality was dissolving, ripping apart the seams of the world. Panicked, I turned again to the child specter, searching for a clue, a way out, but it only laughed, a sound that danced upon the very brink of sanity. "Join us, break the cycle, become part of the story," it whispered, extending a bony hand towards me, inviting, repulsive. A flash of clarity broke through the surrounding hazy vision of the child's laughter, the faces of those captured in time, wrapped in layers of horror yet yearning to be freed. My mind raced, grasping every moment. I needed to remember, to piece together the unraveling tapestry that tied me to this house. Suddenly, the music box from the chest began to play, the soft melody intertwining with the wail of the winds outside. Its notes were haunting, laced with sorrow that echoed throughout my being. With each chime, shadows gathered until they coalesced into figures, each whom had once pleaded for release, now swirling around me, frantic in their attempts to reach through the rift of time. "No more, you cannot keep us," their voices harmonized in a chilling chant, resonating through the air. Then, with a bone-rattling crash, the floor buckled beneath my feet, and I was catapulted to the ground. Darkness engulfed me, but not before I caught a glimpse of the haunted faces smirking, their eyes promising the truth I had been searching for. And within that promise, the final voice emerged, a whisper that chilled my bones, wrapping around my throat like a noose. "You are one of us now, the house is yours." As the darkness pressed in, consuming me utterly, I was left with the mind-shattering realization that the true horror was just beginning. A cacophony of laughter echoed, mingling with the sinister whispers, a prelude to an unimaginable transformation that was set to unfold. Then, silence reclaimed the room. But not the silence of peace. Instead, it was the harbinger of more unspeakable horrors lurking in the shadows, awaiting the next unwitting soul to cross the threshold. And amid the void, a sliver of light emerged, revealing a new door that hadn't been there before, carved with ancient runes and pulsing with an eerie glow. It beckoned me forward again, whispering secrets only it knew, daring me to uncover the truths that lay beyond. With my heart pounding and dread creeping back, I could feel the darkness closing in, ready to swallow me whole. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a vast void that promised another layer of nightmare salvation. "Will you dare to step through?" the child whispered, its chilling breath sending icy tendrils down my spine. And just like that, I was on the edge of a choice, the ground trembling beneath me, calling out to be explored, promising the twisted truths it cradled within its depths. The door yawned wide, stretching like a gaping maw, revealing an expanse that seemed to defy the laws of reality itself. A pulse of energy emanated from within, thrumming in harmony with the frantic beating of my heart. Shadows elongated across the threshold, swirling around my ankles like smoke, tugging me toward that unfathomable darkness. I was paralyzed by terror and curiosity, caught between the suffocating grasp of the house and the beckoning call of the unknown. I took a hesitant step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath me as if in protest. With every motion, the whispers surged again, a torrent rising like an ocean wave, drowning me in its tide. "Reveal the truth, join our dance, embrace the shadows," they cried, their voices a chilling melody that wrapped around me, luring me deeper into the abyss. As I crossed the threshold, the air shifted abruptly, and I was plunged into a world that whispered of forgotten histories and latent horrors. The walls were lined with portraits, their eyes glided over me, following my every movement, alive with dread. Each canvas told a fragmented story, their subjects twisted into grotesquerie, smiling through their anguish as though taunting my very existence. I could sense their pain pulsating through the air, a miasma of desperation that threatened to ensnare my mind. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper into the suffocating darkness, my voice nearly swallowed by the droning hum of the unseen entities surrounding me. The answer came to me as a snarl of angry wind, rushing past my ears, a thousand voices screaming of betrayal and longing. Around me, the air began to shimmer, and I could make out images forming from the darkness, visions of past tragedies unfolding. I was there watching from the shadows, observing a family, laughing and playing, unaware of the malevolence looming over them. The scene morphed into chaos, as a storm brewed outside and darkness enveloped the house. Screams erupted, their joyful laughter replaced by cries for help. I felt their terror bleed into my own, the edges of my consciousness fraying as I became a witness to their despair. Suddenly, the vivid scene collapsed, and I was thrust back into the room, gasping for breath as the air grew thick with anguish. The shadows shifted again, forming into a child's silhouette, features concealed in a veil of darkness. "Now you see it," the child rasped, sounding both triumphant and sorrowful. "Now you can never unsee." But there was something more, a glimmer within the depths of the shadows that seemed to pulse with an unholy promise. "Show them the truth," the child urged, extending its spectral hand toward me. The shadows shifted again, coalescing into jagged, whispering figures, their mouths opening wide as they began to chant in unison, a guttural warning intertwined with pain, yet almost melodic in its fervor. release us," they implored, their faces blurring, the sounds of their voices clawing at my sanity. Panic rose as I realized I was losing my locus of reality. I clasped my hands around my head, fighting against the overwhelming urge to succumb to their sorrow. "What do you want from me?" My voice broke, a tremor slicing through its desperate facade. "You must see the truth," the child whispered again, but now there was a sinister edge to its tone, a promise woven into the very fabric of dread that surrounded me. With a shudder cascading down my spine, I grasped the edges of my panic and forced my gaze toward the silhouettes, half convinced they would reveal something unspeakable. And then I saw it within their midst, A chilling image began to crystallize. An unforgiving cycle of loss, betrayal, and an eternal thirst for vengeance. Your family, your blood, they linger, rasped a new voice from behind me. A rolling thunder that echoed off the walls, sending tremors through my core. Whirling around, I faced an imposing figure draped in shadow, its eyes burning with an insatiable hunger that threatened to engulf the light I clung to. They wish to leave, but are bound by fate just like you. Time froze as realization struck me with the force of a tidal wave. Every secret I had uncovered, every thread that wove through this house, was a tether binding me to a past soaked in grief. The horrors I glimpsed had a pulse, and that pulse was mine. I was the key that kept this nightmare alive. I stumbled backward, dread pooling in my gut as I felt the walls of the room tighten, closing in around me. An inexorable grip that threatened to crush me. No! I refused to be part of this. I screamed, but the shadows only laughed, a chilling cacophony that echoed far beyond my own voice. Then you will suffer the consequences. The figure hissed, its form twisting into a myriad of shapes, shifting like smoke in the darkness. The shadows lunged at me, wrapping around my limbs and restricting my movement, tendrils of anguish curling around my throat. In that moment of desperation, with my very essence being siphoned by the darkness, I saw outside the walls of the Hoshan assortment of torches flickering ominously in the distance. The light unveiled more figures, hazy yet profoundly familiar. They were faces I recognized but couldn't place, an assemblage of those who had vanished into oblivion, people I had known, each sealed within their own torment. And just then, the room erupted into chaos, each shadow releasing a deafening wail as they all converged around me. Panic surged as the walls began to dissolve, the air thickening with dread and despair, suffocating my every hope. Join us in truth or perish, the choice is yours. The child screamed, its voice rattling through the collapsing reality. The warmth of desperation washing over me as I prepared to make a decision I feared would be my last. And as I sank into the darkened spiral of shadow and chaos, the last thing I saw was the group of familiar faces drawing closer. Their mouths contorted in silent screams, their outstretched hands begging me, taunting me, and then there was nothing but darkness, wrapping around me like an inescapable shroud. The darkness clutched at me like a waking nightmare, smothering my senses as echoes of despair morphed into a twisted lullaby. I was no longer a mere observer. I had surrendered to the embrace of the shadows, my essence entwined with their burgeoning chaos. Each breath felt like a betrayal of life itself, mingling with the rancid air that soaked with grief. Fleeting images clawed at the edges of my consciousness, fragments of my past flooding back with relentless fury. In the shadows, I glimpsed my mother's fragile silhouette, eyes gleaming with unshed tears. My heart quaked under the weight of her sorrow. The grip of memories loosened for a moment, unleashing a tide of emotion that washed over the despair of the spectral figures surrounding me. Help us, her voice intertwined with the wails of the lost, transcending the very fabric of reality. But soon, the figures shifted and darkened, morphing into those long-forgotten memories, tainted by the anguish of this accursed place. They twisted into grotesque paradisa representation of the truth that clawed at my mind, whispering secrets and lies. I could feel their eyes boring into me like daggers, judging me, as if I were complicit in their suffering. Desperation bubbled within me, looming like a tempest. I wanted to scream, but instead, I gritted my teeth against the surge of insanity, casting a defiant glare at the swirling shadows that twisted around me like serpents. This is not my fault. I am not the cause of your suffering. But before I could grasp any semblance of courage, the multitude of voices crescendoed into a single, harrowing scream, reverberating around me with a force that sent me sprawling backward. I landed hard against the ground, the coldness seeping into my skin, urging me to submit. In that moment, the shadows peeled back, revealing glimpses of the outside world, a threadbare existence cloaked in flickering torchlight like a transient memory. There, in the dimness, I saw a door ajar, beckoning with whispered promises of escape, a sliver of hope amidst the engulfing darkness. Yet the moment I turned my focus, the shadows tightened their hold, coiling like a snake around my torso, dragging me deeper into their anguish. You cannot leave, the swirling mass hissed, a chorus of fury and despair crashing around me like waves against jagged rocks. Images merged violently before my eyes, forming a vortex of pain. Fires erupted, houses crumbled, and shadows of menacing figures loomed with weapons drawn. I could hear the crackling of wood and the agonized shrieks of families torn apart, their lives flickering away like the last flickers of flame. It all spiraled in on itself, and I was caught in a maelstrom of suffering, feeling every loss, every betrayal seep into my veins. Join us. The child's voice rang clear, now emerging from the cacophony like a savior's hymn warped by malice. I turned to face the specter, now towering above me, unfurling its ghostly limbs in grotesque grandeur, illuminating the shadows of horrors behind it. You must embrace the truth, for it binds you to us. Your bloodlines flow through the misery. You are fated to witness. And then, as though summoned by its command, the room warped again. I felt a pull, a gravitational force that yanked me to the center of the torment. An opening split the ground, a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth, whispering sweetly of oblivion. You cannot unknow, you cannot unfeel. The chorus chanted, a melody now laced with venomous intent. Join the cycle of shadows or face an eternity of suffering. The walls trembled. I felt my heart pound furiously against the confines of my chest as an unspeakable dread washed over me. The once fragile child grew ferocious, melding into an amalgamation of terrifying figures, each shadowed face a reflection of lost hopes twisted into contempt. They stretched toward me, reaching with skeletal fingers, desperate to reclaim what was lost me: family, my life, my hope, all twisted into the depths of despair. Suddenly, my gaze flickered back to the portal beyond the door into light. Flickered, fading, away just like hope ever seemed to do. But amid my fear, something deep within me roared to life. An ember sputtered in the chamber of my soul, fueled by a primal urge to fight. I would not surrender to despair. The shadows reacted violently. The tendrils writhed around me as I clawed my way to the conclusion that I was not merely a bystander. I harbored the power of choice. I will not bow to your terror. I screamed, the sound ripping from my throat, echoing before me. Simultaneously, a shiver raced through the darkness, ripping through the shadows as my defiance ignited something deep within them. A primitive echo of power sparked awareness. And just as I felt the grip slacken at my wrists, that blinding doorway flickered back to life with renewed ferocity, a sliver of salvation bursting through the shadows toward me. The anguished wails of the lost intensified, rising into a deafening crescendo as they stretched toward the light-hungry, yearning, needing. But before I could race for the door, before I could reclaim my escape, the ever-watchful eyes of the portrait figures tightened their gaze upon me. One shadowed face shifted, mouth twisting into a malicious grin. You think you can leave? The truth is never far behind, it warned. An icy chill threading through my heart. With a sickening lurch, the ground beneath me split, and I felt my heels teetering over the precipice. I clawed one final time toward the illumination, but it flickered like a dying star, threatening to extinguish any shred of hope I had. And as darkness surged back, seizing my heart like a vice, I realized my grave erramy flight might lose me everything. With an earth-shattering howl, a great shadow lunged from the abyss, its colossal form looming, a nightmare come to life. I froze, realizing I had opened a gateway not just for myself but for something far more terrifying. And in that brief, soul-crushing instant, as the world distorted and the cries of the damned echoed around me, I caught sight of the twisted reflection I never wished to see: me own anguished face in the depths of the gaping void. Then the door slammed shut. The air thickened with tension, and the silence that ensued felt loaded with sinister anticipation. As the pounding of my heart echoed against the walls, dread settled upon me like the heavy weight of a funeral shroud. The monstrous figure from the abyss loomed closer, a palpable force of darkness that stretched beyond the boundaries of the human mind. It was a distortion of something once familiar, a grotesque version of all my fears rolled into one monstrous form, shifting and writhing with unfathomable agony. In that blinding moment when the world of light and shadow screamed for my soul, the air electrified, laden with the acrid scent of decay. I felt power surge through the shadows around me, a hollow yearning reminiscent of that child's voice. coaxing me closer to the brink with promises of release from the torment. "Come now, join us," the figure hissed, their presence entangling my thoughts with grotesque fantasies of suffering and vengeance that simmered beneath the surface of reality. I could not turn away from it. The primal allure was enticing, promising me the ultimate revelation, the truth, my truth, and yet it coiled around my spirit, ready to constrict it into nothingness. I fought against the shadows that sought to drown me. "I must know," I cried out, my voice shaking, torn between the depths of curiosity and the instinctual terror that clawed at my insides. A chorus of soothing murmurs washed over me, whispers gliding through the air, wrapping me in a cold embrace. "You already know," they cooed, their words weaving into my very essence, unraveling the seams of my resolve. "The blood ties your family is woven into this nightmare," unable to escape the pattern of their own mistakes. As I stood teetering on the precipice, the figures thronged at the edges of my vision, their hollowed eyes reflecting the dark truths I had spent a lifetime denying. Memories mixed with the spectral visions around me, and gory flashes of betrayal and regret surged like tidal waves. I could see my mother's anguish mixed with my father's fury, their legacies tainted by loss, love twisted into a grotesque mask of despair. When the shadows pulsed and shivered, pooling around my feet like a tidal wave ready to engulf me, I realized what I faced was not merely a creature of darkness, but my family's cursed history woven into the very fabric of this forsaken land. Beneath the cacophony of twisted laughter and anguished cries, a singular realization chilled me deeper than any winter's blast. I was not the victim. I was an integral part of this macabre design, destined to bear witness to their sins. "Remember," echoed a voice, softer than the rest, yet more insistent, me younger self, a spark in the haze of despair. "Never forget what they did to us." Rage sparked anew within me. No longer would I sit in the shadows as a mere observer. I would face the monster that raged within. Yet the apparition moved closer, its amorphous body swirling with the essence of all that I had loved and lost. As a hand reached out from the depths of its formed and reformed limbs, I felt bone-deep terror grasp at my throat. "To uncover the truth, you must embrace the guilt, the sorrow, and the rage," it intoned, the timeless echo a promise and a threat. "Only then will you learn what must be reclaimed or destroyed." Just as I braced myself against the darkness, feeling the pull of the void reach toward me with insatiable eagerness, my desire for escape reared its head with renewed vigor. With a surge of rebellion, I threw myself at the embodiment of my fear, an unholy fusion of instinct and desperation. The moment of collision ignited an explosion of colors and shadows, colliding memories and horrors bursting forth like fireflies in the night sky, illuminating the stifled screams trapped within the void and retracing the sorrow of my lineage. I swung wildly through the maelstrom, tearing at the shadow's construct, desperate to unveil the cracks in its facade, to unearth the stories buried beneath the weight of silence. But just as I pierced the veil of despair, a realization sent icy fingers skittering down my spineous psychic tether, binding me to all of it, began to anchor me firmly. The more I fought, the deeper I was pulled into the chaotic web, the more entangled I became. The more I felt their pain flood through meth. Anger of past betrayals surged forth like wildfire. "Your kin's betrayals are your own," the monstrosity snarled, its voice steeped in gibbering madness. "You cannot escape them or your fate." As the shadows coalesced back into the form of my kinforms, tempted by the edges of lost pages in time, I caught glimpses of their haunted expressions, the mirrors of my darkest fears reflected in their eyes, and in that brief instant of clarity amidst a cyclone of chaos, I understood the horror. The truth I had yearned to uncover was the very anchor that held me captive. There, in that singular heartbeat of awareness, I paused, locking eyes with my ancestors, the twisted manifestations of long-buried regret and horror, and then the ground below me quaked, fragments of forgotten history pushing too thickly against my skin. The shadows erupted, a gaping maw of darkness yawning wide beneath my feet, rock and stone crumbling away into endless nothingness, threatening to swallow me whole as I slipped helplessly into their unyielding grasp. "Accept it," the chorus howled, their wails merging into a thunderous symphony. "For in the depths of despair lies the power to reshape your fate." As the void yawned wider and wider, darkness swallowing all light, a final scream pierced the consuming silence, My desperate cry etched with more than despair. It was recognition, a fractured truth breaking free, the very essence of horror tangible in the air around me, even as I felt the abyss collide with my soul. Let go, embrace your legacy. They beckoned, and I twisted, frantically reaching for the echo of what once was, for that fleeting light pushing against the encroaching darkness, battling against the surge of family secrets there to consume me whole. And just before the engulfing darkness claimed me, I caught a glimpse of something, a flash of vibrant color weaving through the tapestry of shadows. With frantic desperation, I clawed my way toward it just as the relentless grasp of darkness pulled me into its depths. In those last, fractured moments, I heard an anguished scream that was not my own, echoing through the void, and felt a rift snap open in my mind, a gateway to what lay beyond, and I plunged into the unknown. My path as uncertain as the answers I so desperately sought. Then everything went dark. The chill of the void enveloped me, a weightless descent through a darkness that felt alive, each moment stretching into eternity. I flailed, reaching out with trembling hands, desperate for something solid, anything to anchor me. The silence was a suffocating shroud, but the echoes of agony clawed at my thoughts, feeding the dread that coiled in the depths of my mind. Then I landed not softly upon the ground, but with a jarring impact that drove the breath from my lungs. I gasped, body slick with an unseen, slimy substance, each heartbeat echoing like a war drum in my ears. As I regained my senses, a glimmer of light emerged from the haze, beckoning like the glow of a distant star. I staggered toward it, shivering violently, the air wrapping around me like serpents ready to constrict. The odor that clung to me, sulphurous and rot-infested, worsened with every step. The light swelled, revealing a macabre scene unfurling before me, a deserted village shrouded in twilight. Walls draped with tendrils of thick, black vines that slithered like serpents upon the cobblestone streets. The sight sent my heart racing anew. Majestic houses, once vibrant, now lay crumbling and abandoned, their windows hollowed out like the desperate eyes of the damned. And amidst the decay, whispers flitted through the air, murmurs of lost hopes mingling with unspeakable terror. I squinted into the shadows. Something was moving, that a brittle skeleton of a child, dressed in tattered rags, appeared in front of me. Hollow eyes glinted with an intelligence that struck deeper than mere fright. It seemed to search the very depths of my soul. "You're one of them," it rasped, its voice a thread of wind barely audible above the gathering storm. "You've come to join the reckoning." I stumbled back, only to find myself face to face with spectral figures creeping from the recesses of the village. Their forms shifted, merging and breaking apart, torn between the corporeal and the ethereal, the damned and the lost. Ghostly faces morphed in and out of clarity, whispering sins that twisted like flames licking up the walls. "Reveal the truth," they cried in dissonance. "For only then can you be free." An icy wind swirled and moaned around me as I pivoted to run. But as I did, the landscape shifted like sand beneath my feet. The sprawling dance of terror, it seemed, had other plans. The village circled me tighter, a sphere of dark despair, its inhabitants crawling closer, vibrant within their torment, a collective rejection of their fates. "Face your family," the children's voices chimed, overlaying the adult specters in a cacophony of grief. "Face what they have become." Slinking shadows pulled me toward an enormous edifice at the center of the village, the town hall, adorned with grotesque faces carved into the wood. The whimpers of the lost clawed at my ears as the door creaked open, as if responding to an unspeakable command. I hesitated, dread flooding my veins like ice. Inside, the air pulsed with energy, thickening with malevolence, wrapping itself around every object, every darkened corner. A long table stretched the length of the room, adorned with remnants of forgotten meals and cracked dishes. But at its head sat a silhouette cloaked in darkness, a mirror to the monstrous figure from before. As I approached, tendrils of shadow snaked from the figure, brushing against my skin, their static electricity igniting memories, old grievances tangled in my DNA. The figure halted my movement with a skeletal finger raised, beckoning with an uncanny familiarity. "You've taken long enough, haven't you?" purred, voice smooth, laced with mock bemusement. "Who are you?" My voice trembled, and the question hung heavy in the air. Suffocating under the burden of history, I could feel lurking in the walls your fate. It answered, eyes glowing like coals amid flames of despair. Come closer. Embrace the truth and witness the horrors they never wished to show you. And just as I drew nearer, as though compelled by an unseen force, I felt a gut-wrenching shift against the walls surrounding me, and the figures that had been gathering outside began to scream a sound laced with an inconceivable agony. Their grief coalesced into a single entity as they started to pour into the hall, starving for justice yet repulsed by the weight of their past. The dark figure leaned forward, revealing a face that unsettled all sense of reason in me. Very ancestor I had known rolled into one hollow yet haunting visage. You have arrived to seal their fates. It hissed, the fusion of voices cascading over me, drowning out the cries of the vengeful spirits. Before I could react, the shadows swelled around me, wrapping tighter than exploding outward, dispersing into an amalgam of despair and rage. The hall trembled with their swirling presence, the air thick with wrath. In the center of it all, an ensnared truth appeared, a vision of my family's sins illuminated before me, grotesque and vivid like a macabre tapestry spun from their grief. Then, as if drawn by unseen strings, I felt the gravitational pull of their anguish threaten to implode upon me, as the shadows spiraled tighter, weaving a noose woven from regret and guilt, seeking to bind me to their fate. The floor beneath me heaved, threatening to swallow us all just as I glimpsed something sharp and glinting at my feet, the dagger, a family heirloom drenched in blood, its insidious lure palpable through the air. My hand moved of its own accord, grasping the hilt, a cacophony of voices urging me forward. But the echoing whispers of my ancestors turned savage, their screams harmonizing into a desperate plea, one side of their rage searching for vengeance, the other yearning for absolution. With a scream rising from deep within my gut, I clutched the dagger tightly and prepared myself for the horror that lurked within the truth, resolving to plunge into its depths. Only then did the shadows crescendo, sending a reverberation through the very fabric of reality as they mingled with my blood. Angry, relentless, choose, they thundered, their whispering voices drumming in perfect unison. As the room tilted toward darkness and I stood poised above the precipice of fate, the one glaring question consumed my thoughts. What would I become? And before I could respond, the dagger pulled me forward as a blinding light exploded, enveloping all in its path, shattering the confines of existence, revealing a reality that crumbled and reformed before my eyes. When the light faded, I found myself standing in an all-too-familiar space, a reflection of my childhood home. It appeared just as I remembered, each color and crack in the wood reminiscent of laughter and love. For a fleeting moment, warmth wrapped around me, making me hesitate on the threshold of joy I had long lost. But shadows crept in, weaving through the corners, tendrils of darkness casting heavy doubts into my newfound joy, whispering the truth I feared to acknowledge. As I stepped inside, the air crackled with static, a frigid chill that turned my breath to mist. I called out, my voice echoing like a distant apparition, testing the waters of this resurrected cheer. Mom? Dad? Silence followed, a suffocating, heavy void that bore down on me with crushing weight. The very walls seemed to breathe in tandem with my burgeoning dread. They were watching, waiting from the give and take between light and shadow. Then, from behind the wallpaper peeking loose at the corners, I heard them, the children's laughter. It enveloped me, and I sank further into the chiaroscuro of reality and illusion. I followed the sound, heart pounding against my chest until I arrived in the living room where mischief thrived, yet now lay draped in decay. The furniture was draped in sheets, remnants of a past too broken to embrace. The laughter faded, replaced by the echoes of whispered tales weaving in and around me, singing a siren song that pushed deeper into my memories. Discover us, they chimed, laughter turning to a haunting hum. Suddenly, the air shifted, swirling around as a sudden gust erupted from nowhere and everywhere at once, spinning me on my axis and blinding me with a darkness almost tangible. I stumbled, crashing against the long-abandoned sofa that sighed under my weight, the laughter still echoing beneath the roots of memory. The dagger remained clutched tightly in my palm, its cold metal a reminder of the truth that lay hidden beneath each corner of this twisted homage to the past. I closed my eyes, drawing in a breath deep enough to fill my lungs, reaffirming my resolve. "Show me!" A loud crack pierced through the silence, resonating off the walls before revealing a stroll back through time. Images unfolded before my eyes, me parents, their smiles sickly sweet, tinged with shadows that morphed and twisted in the background, their jovial warmth cloaked in the guise of malice. I was thrust into their world, grappling desperately with the realization that their reality had been warped. Every lesson learned a guise over a festering truth, each moment draped in layers of deceptions. "Look deeper," the shrouded voices urged, entwining the living and dead in a desperate embrace. The shadows writhed around me like writhing serpents, whispering secrets long buried deep. I pushed forward, chasing fragments of all I had known, all I had yet to grasp. Behind the fading warmth of my memories stood the darkest versions of my lineage, the faces of ancestors blurred yet recognizable. Their hunger for vengeance washed over me like a crashing wave, a demand for absolution swirling in the space where regret and hope collided. "You must be willing to bear your family's sins," they intoned, their collective voices rising in a crescendo that clawed at my sanity. "Only then can we be freed." That a wild surge of desperation ignited my spirit as I stepped toward the worn family portrait that hung on the wall, each smiling face twisted in shadows threatening to consume those I loved. "I will," I shouted, my voice raw and broken. The moment I spoke that vow, the room erupted into chaos, the laughter morphing into manic howls that echoed the very screams of the souls trapped within. Being spun into darkness, hideous truths unfolded before me. I turned the dagger with my heart pounding, blood surging with newfound resolve as I prepared to sever the ties that bound them to this world. A portal opened up before me, shuddering with shades of empathy and anguish, a gaping maw into which I would cast the weight of their betrayal. With a deep breath, I plunged the dagger into the void, feeling it connect with the essence of their suffering. But the shadows screamed against my resolve, and for a breathtaking moment, I felt the realizations surfacing like thrashing waves. "You think you're ending this? You only feed it more." They drew closer, their eyes glittering with a hunger that reached into the very core of my being, shrouding me in a veil of irreversible decay. I twisted away from their grasp, feeling each distant call beckoning me back into their woven tales of despair. But I had glimpsed the truth, the binding nature of family, an interwoven legacy as me absolution lay not in betrayal but in redemption. Tension crackled in the air as I stood tall, securing the dagger tighter. I felt my strength imbue the blade, sharpened by the weight of the family history thrumming through my veins. "You will not claim me," I roared, driving the dagger further, piercing not only the void but shattering the very essence of this intergenerational curse. In that singular moment, I felt the barriers shake, unspooling a torrent of light that burst free from the depths, a storm of sorrow and regret that would finally break the chains and cast this darkness away. And amidst the blinding radiance, I caught a glimpse of my parents, this time not trapped in shadows but emerging in their true forms, tear-streaked yet radiant. "Thank you," they whispered in unison. But even within their clarity, I sensed something still lurking beneath the surface. The first wave rolled back, revealing the archway where it had begun, a haunting yet glorious choir of lost souls rising alongside those freed from the shackles of grief. Yet as the final tendrils of darkness dissipated, I realized there remained one last secret lurking. The light illuminated the room, echoing deeper truths that reverberated through the floorboards of our shattered home. I felt a chill skitter up my spine, and behind me, I could hear a whisper of voice lingering with a haunting clarity. "Find it," it echoed. "Before it finds you again." I end that suspended breath. Dread rose once more as the echoes of laughter morphed back into the remains of the anguish I thought I'd absolved. I staggered back, eyeing the darkness, knowing well it would always be with me, shadowing my legacy, waiting to reclaim what had once been lost. And that realization settled it was not only a curse but a responsibility, a weight I must bear. The dark corners beckoned, a promise of return looming in the air, yet I had come too far to turn back. With a final glance over my shoulder, my heart ached with acceptance. This cycle would never truly end, not as long as shadows pulsed beneath the weight of light. And so, as I stepped into the conscious world anew, I knew one day, when I least expected it, the darkness would rise again, and I would have to fight once more. Faith has no warranty, the unrelenting whisper echoed in my mind. A chilling reminder of what lay waiting beneath the surface of my life. As I turned toward the door, a reflection of myself danced ominously within the shadows. Smirking, the cycle pulsed anew, glimmering with certainty, full of sinister possibility. That it seemed this haunting had only just begun.